You know that moment when you finally hit a financial milestone and suddenly realize the game has completely changed again. Like when you thought reaching your first $1,000 was huge, then 10,000 felt impossible, and now you're staring at 20,000 in your account wondering what comes next. Well, here's something that might shock you. That $20,000 mark isn't just another number on your financial journey. It's actually the launching pad for something much bigger than most people ever realize. My name is Emmy, and I've spent countless hours researching the psychology behind wealth accumulation and why certain dollar amounts create these massive shifts in how we think, act, and build our futures. If you're someone who's either approaching that 20,000 milestone or you've recently crossed it and you're wondering what the heck happens now, make sure you hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to share with you will completely change how you see your financial trajectory. Most financial content focuses on getting to that first 20,000 like it's some kind of finish line. Save your emergency fund, they say. Build up 3 to 6 months of expenses, they tell you. But nobody talks about what actually happens once you cross that threshold. And trust me, crossing 20,000 isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything. Picture this scenario. You've been grinding for months, maybe even years, watching your savings account slowly climb. Every dollar felt precious. Every sacrifice felt significant. You skipped dinners out, drove your old car longer than you wanted to, and said no to countless opportunities because you were focused on reaching that magical $20,000 number. Then one day, you check your account, and there it is. $20,000 and change sitting in your savings. But instead of feeling like you've arrived somewhere, something strange happens. You realize you've actually just unlocked an entirely different level of the wealth-building game. And the rules at this level are nothing like what you experienced getting here. Here's what nobody tells you about crossing $20,000. Your brain doesn't just feel more secure about money. It starts operating in a completely different mode altogether. When you were saving your first few thousand, every financial decision felt heavy and consequential. Should you buy the name brand groceries or stick with generic? Can you afford that streaming subscription this month? Every choice carried weight because every dollar mattered so much. But something fascinating happens once you hit 20,000. Those micro decisions that used to consume your mental energy suddenly feel insignificant. Not because you've become careless with money, but because you've developed what I call financial perspective. You stop sweating the small expenses and start focusing your energy on the decisions that actually move the needle. Think about it this way. When you had $2,000 saved, spending $50 on something felt like a major financial event. That's 2.5% of your entire net worth disappearing in one transaction. But when you have $20,000 saved, that same $50 purchase represents just 0.25% of your wealth. Your brain processes these numbers differently. And this shift in perception changes everything about how you approach money. Now here's where things get really interesting. And this is something that most people completely miss. Reaching 20,000 doesn't just change how you spend money. It fundamentally alters how you think about earning money. When you're living paycheck to paycheck or slowly building your first few thousand, your focus is entirely on preservation. How do I keep what I have? How do I avoid losing money? How do I make this last until my next paycheck? But 20,000 creates enough breathing room for your brain to shift from defensive thinking to offensive thinking. Instead of asking how you can protect what you have, you start asking how you can grow what you have. This mental shift is absolutely crucial because it's the difference between someone who builds modest savings and someone who builds genuine wealth. The mathematics behind this shift are actually pretty straightforward, but the psychological impact is enormous. When you invest $1,000 and it grows by 10%, you make $100. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. When you invest $10,000 at that same 10% growth rate, you make $1,000. Now we're talking about real money that you can actually feel in your day-to-day life. But here's the part that will absolutely blow your mind. When you have $20,000 working for you at an 8% annual return, That's $1,600 flowing into your account over the course of a year without you having to work a single additional hour. Money that showed up purely because your existing money was busy making more money while you slept, while you worked your regular job, while you went about your normal life. This is when compound interest stops being some abstract concept you read about in finance books and starts becoming a tangible force in your actual financial reality. You're not just reading about the power of compound growth anymore. You're experiencing it firsthand every time you check your investment account and see numbers that are higher than what you put in. And here's something that might surprise you about this stage of wealth building. The skills that got you to 20,000 are completely different from the skills that will take you from 20,000 to your next milestone. Getting to 20,000 required discipline, sacrifice, and the ability to say no to immediate pleasures in favor of long-term goals. Those are incredibly valuable skills, and you should be proud of developing them. But growing beyond 20,000 requires a different skill set altogether. It requires learning how to evaluate investment opportunities, understanding risk versus reward, and developing the confidence to put your money to work in ways that might have felt too scary when you only had a few $1,000s to your name. This is where most people get stuck, and it's why so many individuals reach $20,000 or $30,000 and then plateau there for years. They've mastered the art of saving, but they haven't learned the art of investing. They're comfortable with the certainty of a savings account, but they're terrified of the uncertainty that comes with actual wealth building. The transition from saver to investor is probably one of the most challenging psychological hurdles you'll face in your entire financial journey. And I'm not talking about the technical aspects of picking stocks or choosing index funds. I'm talking about the fundamental shift in mindset that has to happen when you realize that keeping all your money in a savings account, earning 1% interest, is actually costing you money in the long run. When you have $5,000, parking it in a high-yield savings account feels responsible and smart. But when you have $20,000 sitting there earning minimal interest while inflation eats away at your purchasing power, you start to understand that playing it safe isn't actually safe at all. This realization can be terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Here's what I've noticed happens to people at this stage. They become obsessed with learning about investments, but they're paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. They'll spend months researching every possible option, reading endless articles about market volatility, and calculating potential returns down to the penny. But all this analysis often becomes a form of procrastination because they're afraid of losing what took them so long to build. The irony is that this fear of losing money often prevents people from making the exact moves that would accelerate their wealth building dramatically. While they're sitting on $20,000 trying to decide between different investment strategies, someone else with the same amount of money but more willingness to take calculated risks is already 6 months into their investment journey, learning through actual experience rather than theoretical research. But let's talk about something even more interesting that happens at the $20,000 mark. Your relationship with risk changes in ways you probably never expected. When you had limited savings, any financial risk felt enormous because you had so little cushion to fall back on. But $20,000 creates what I call a risk tolerance buffer that completely transforms how you evaluate opportunities. Suddenly, putting $5,000 into an investment doesn't feel like you're risking everything. It feels like you're risking a portion of your wealth while keeping the majority safe. This psychological shift opens up possibilities that simply weren't available to you when you had smaller amounts of money. You can afford to take educated risks because you're not betting your entire financial future on a single decision. This is where the real magic starts happening in your wealth-building journey. You begin to understand that wealthy people don't just save their way to financial independence. They use their savings as a foundation to build something much larger. They use money to make money, and they're comfortable with the uncertainty that comes with growth investments because they know that over long time periods, the mathematics work in their favor. Now here's something that might shock you about what happens once you cross 20,000 and start investing seriously. Your money doesn't just grow linearly anymore. It starts growing exponentially, and the timeline for reaching your next financial milestones compresses in ways that will absolutely amaze you. Let's say you continue saving $1,000 per month while your $20,000 is invested, earning an average of 8% annually. Your second $20,000 doesn't take another 20 months to accumulate. It happens faster because your investments are doing an increasing share of the heavy lifting. By the time you're working toward your third $20,000 increment, the acceleration becomes even more dramatic. This is when people start to really understand why the wealthy seem to get wealthier so quickly. It's not because they have some secret knowledge or exclusive access to special investments. It's because they've reached the point where their money is working at least as hard as they are, if not harder. But here's the part that most people find both exciting and terrifying. Once you hit $20,000 and start investing seriously, you realize that the traditional advice about slow and steady wealth building is actually holding you back. Not because there's anything wrong with being consistent and disciplined, but because there are opportunities available to people with $20,000 that simply don't exist for people with $2,000. Real estate investment becomes a realistic possibility. Starting a business becomes feasible because you have enough capital to survive the early stages when income might be unpredictable. You can invest in yourself through education, certifications, or courses that could dramatically increase your earning potential. These aren't luxuries anymore. They're strategic investments in your financial future. The most successful people I know who've built significant wealth all have one thing in common. They reached a point where they stopped thinking about money as something to hoard and started thinking about it as a tool for creating more opportunities. $20,000 is often that inflection point where this mental shift becomes possible. But let me warn you about something that happens to a lot of people at this stage. They get so excited about investment opportunities that they forget about the foundation that got them here in the first place. They take unnecessary risks. They chase get-rich-quick schemes, or they put all their money into a single investment because they're impatient to see faster results. This is where having $20,000 can actually become dangerous if you're not careful. The confidence that comes with having a substantial amount of money can lead to overconfidence in your investment abilities. You might start thinking you're smarter than you actually are about markets, businesses, or financial opportunities. The key is finding the right balance between taking advantage of the opportunities that $20,000 creates while still respecting the discipline and patience that got you to this point in the first place. You want to be aggressive enough to grow your wealth significantly, but not so aggressive that you jeopardize the foundation you've worked so hard to build. Worked so hard to build. That $20,000 milestone isn't just another number in your savings account. It's the moment when everything you thought you knew about money gets turned upside down in the best possible way. You've proven to yourself that you can build wealth, you've developed the mental framework to think beyond survival mode, and you've unlocked access to opportunities that simply don't exist at lower wealth levels. But remember, crossing $20,000 is just the beginning of your real wealth-building journey. The habits that got you here are incredibly valuable, but the strategies that will take you to your next milestone are completely different. Don't let fear of making mistakes keep you sitting on the sidelines. The biggest risk isn't losing some of your money through smart investments. The biggest risk is letting inflation and missed opportunities slowly erode the purchasing power of everything you've worked so hard to save. Whether you're still grinding toward that $20,000 mark or you've recently crossed it and you're wondering what comes next, remember that every wealthy person started exactly where you are right now. They just decided to keep playing the game instead of settling for the safety of the sidelines. Your financial future is counting on the decisions you make today, so make them count.